The morning sun cast long shadows across the busy downtown street as Marcus Thompson made his way to the grocery store. His left leg moved with a slight limp, a reminder of the roadside bomb that had changed his life forever in Afghanistan 3 years ago. The 34-year-old veteran wore his old army jacket, faded but clean, over a simple white t-shirt and jeans. His disability check barely covered rent and groceries, but Marcus never complained. He had learned to find peace in small things after coming home. The automatic doors of the supermarket slid open with a gentle whoosh. Marcus grabbed a small cart and began his weekly routine. He moved slowly through the aisles, carefully checking prices and comparing brands. Every dollar mattered when you lived on a fixed income. He picked up bread, milk, some canned soup, and a small bag of apples. Simple meals had become his norm since leaving the service. As Marcus approached the checkout line, he noticed it was busier than usual. The Saturday morning rush was in full swing, with families doing their weekly shopping. He positioned himself behind a mother with 2 young children who were excitedly pointing at candy displays. The woman smiled at Marcus politely, and he nodded back with a gentle smile of his own. Behind him, the line grew longer as more customers joined the queue. Marcus pulled out a small notebook where he kept track of his spending, making sure he had enough money for everything in his cart. The habit had developed during his toughest months after discharge, when every penny truly counted. The children in front of him were getting restless, and their mother was doing her best to keep them calm while unloading her groceries onto the conveyor belt. One of the kids, a boy who looked about 6 years old, turned around and stared at Marcus with curious eyes. The veteran gave him a small wave, which made the boy giggle and hide behind his mother's legs. As the line moved forward, Marcus felt a sudden hard shove from behind that nearly knocked him off balance. His injured leg struggled to support him as he stumbled forward, barely catching himself on the cart handle. The pain shot up through his leg, a sharp reminder of the metal fragment still lodged near his knee that doctors couldn't safely remove. "Move it, Gimp," came a harsh voice from behind. "Some of us don't have all day to wait for your slow ass." Marcus turned around slowly to see a tall, heavy-set man in his 40s glaring down at him. The man wore expensive clothes and had gold rings on several fingers. His face was red with impatience, and his eyes held a cold cruelty that Marcus had seen before in combat zones. The man's shopping cart was full of premium items, suggesting he had never worried about money or struggled to make ends meet. "Imbriome, sorry," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the pain in his leg. "I was just trying to keep up with the line." The aggressive stranger stepped closer, invading Marcus's personal space. His breath smelled of coffee and something else Marcus couldn't identify. "Sorry doesn't cut it, cripple. People like you shouldn't be allowed out in public if you can't keep up with normal folks." The mother in front of Marcus turned around, her face showing concern and disapproval at what she was witnessing. Other customers in nearby lines began to notice the commotion, but most looked away uncomfortably, not wanting to get involved in what appeared to be an escalating confrontation. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. Years of military training and the discipline learned through hardship helped him maintain control. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to buy my groceries like everyone else." The bully laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. "Trouble? You think this is trouble? Wait until you see what real trouble looks like, soldier boy." He had noticed the army jacket and the way Marcus carried himself despite the injury. "What's wrong? Your government handout's not enough to buy yourself some manners?" The insult hit deep, but Marcus remained composed. He had dealt with prejudice and misunderstanding before. Many people didn't understand the sacrifices made by veterans or the challenges they faced returning to civilian life. He had learned that responding with anger only made situations worse. The cashier, a young woman in her 20s, looked nervous as the tension in her line increased. She tried to process the mother's groceries faster, hoping to defuse the situation by keeping the line moving. The mother whispered something to her children, who had stopped their playful behavior and were now watching the adults with worried expressions. Marcus took a deep breath and made a decision that would prove to be crucial in the moments to come. Instead of backing down or escalating the confrontation, He chose a different path. "Sir, I understand you're in a hurry. If you'd like, you can go ahead of me. I'm not in any rush." The offer of kindness seemed to enrage the bully even more. "Don't try to play hero with me, you broken-down reject. The world doesn't owe you anything just because you couldn't handle being a real soldier." What neither Marcus nor the aggressive stranger realized was that their confrontation had attracted the attention of someone very special who was shopping in the next aisle over. Someone whose presence would soon change everything about this ordinary Saturday morning at the grocery store. 3 aisles away from the unfolding drama, Sergeant James Wellington was selecting breakfast cereal for his family. The 42-year-old man stood 6 feet tall with perfect posture that came from decades of military service. His civilian clothes were neat and pressed, though they couldn't hide the unmistakable bearing of a professional soldier. James had been shopping for his wife and 2 daughters, enjoying a rare weekend off from his duties. What made James different from other shoppers wasn't immediately obvious to casual observers. Beneath his ordinary appearance lay an extraordinary career spanning 22 years of elite military service. He was a member of the Queen's Guard, one of the most prestigious and demanding positions in the British Army. For the past 8 years he had stood watch at Buckingham Palace, protecting the royal family with unwavering dedication and exceptional skill. James had served in multiple combat zones before earning his place among the Queen's Guard. He had seen action in Iraq, Afghanistan, and several classified operations that would never appear in any public record. His chest bore ribbons and medals that spoke of courage under fire, exceptional service, and the trust of his commanders. But more than his military achievements, James possessed something that couldn't be taught in any training program: an absolute intolerance for bullies and those who preyed on the vulnerable. The sound of raised voices cut through the general hum of weekend shopping. James paused in his cereal selection, his trained ears immediately recognizing the tone of conflict. Years of security work had sharpened his ability to distinguish between normal conversation and potential threats. What he was hearing now was definitely the latter. He moved quietly toward the source of the disturbance, his steps measured and purposeful. As he rounded the corner into the main checkout area, James took in the scene with the quick assessment skills that had kept him alive. In dangerous situations around the world, he saw the middle-aged veteran, clearly struggling with mobility issues, facing off against a larger, aggressive man who was obviously the instigator. The veteran's posture told James everything he needed to know. The man was trying to de-escalate, showing remarkable restraint in the face of obvious provocation. James recognized the signs immediately. This was a fellow soldier, someone who had served his country and was now being attacked by a civilian who had never known the weight of duty or sacrifice. The world doesn't owe you anything just because you couldn't handle being a real soldier, the bully was saying as James approached. Those words hit James like a physical blow. In his years of service, he had seen too many good soldiers come home broken in body or spirit. He had attended funerals for brothers in arms who had given everything for their country, only to struggle with indifference or hostility from the very people they had sworn to protect. The casual cruelty of the bully's words awakened something deep and protective in the Royal Guard's trained heart. James stepped into the checkout area with the fluid movement of a predator. His presence was immediately felt by those nearby, though the bully remained focused on his victim. The other customers instinctively stepped back, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The air itself seemed to change as James positioned himself within striking distance of the confrontation. The mother with her children looked up and her eyes widened. Something about James's bearing, the way he carried himself, made it clear that this was no ordinary shopper. Her children stopped fidgeting entirely, as if they could sense the shift in the atmosphere around them. Marcus felt it too, a change in the energy of the space. His military instincts, dulled by civilian life but never entirely dormant, began to stir. Someone was behind him, someone who moved like a soldier. He caught a glimpse of reflection in the security mirror above the checkout counter and saw a man approaching with the controlled grace of elite military training. The bully, completely unaware of the new presence, continued his verbal assault. "People like you are a drain on society. Why don't you crawl back to whatever hole you came from and stop wasting normal people's time? It was at that moment that James decided he had heard enough. The royal guard took one more step forward, close enough now that his voice would carry, clearly to everyone in the immediate area. When he spoke, his words were delivered with the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Excuse me," James said, his British accent cutting through the American voices. Like a blade. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation." The bully turned around, ready to unleash his anger on another target. But when he saw James, something in the man's bearing gave him pause. This wasn't another victim to intimidate. This was someone who looked like he could fight back, and fight back effectively. "This is none of your business, buddy," the bully said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Keep walking." James smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. It was the smile of someone who had faced down much more dangerous opponents than a supermarket bully. "Actually, when I see someone disrespecting a veteran, it becomes very much my business." The checkout area had gone quiet. Other customers pretended to shop while actually watching the confrontation unfold. The cashier had stopped scanning items, her hand frozen over the barcode reader. Even the children had gone silent, sensing that something important was happening. Marcus turned fully around now, and his eyes met those of the newcomer. In that instant, there was a recognition that passed between them, the unspoken understanding that exists between soldiers who have served in harm's way. James gave Marcus the slightest nod, a gesture that communicated respect, solidarity, and a promise that the bullying was about to end. The bully looked back and forth between the two men, suddenly realizing that the situation had shifted dramatically, against his favor. What had started as an easy target had become something much more complicated and potentially dangerous for him. The tension in the checkout area had become thick enough to cut with a knife. James stood perfectly still, his hands relaxed at his sides, but every person in the vicinity could sense the controlled power radiating from him. The bully found himself caught between two veterans now, and the dynamics of the confrontation had shifted completely out of his favor. "Look, foreign boy," the bully said, trying to regain his dominance through aggression. "This is America. We don't need some British pretty boy telling us how to handle our own problems." James's expression didn't change, but those who knew how to read military bearing could see the slight tightening around his eyes. The insult had been noted and catalogued, but the Royal Guard's discipline held firm. He had faced down terrorists and enemy combatants in some of the world's most dangerous places. A supermarket bully was barely worth his full attention. "You're absolutely right," James replied, his voice remaining steady and controlled. "This is America, a country that this gentleman served with honor." He gestured toward Marcus without taking his eyes off the aggressor. "A country where veterans deserve respect, not abuse from people who've never worn a uniform." The bully's face grew redder as he realized his intimidation tactics weren't working on this new target. "How do you know he's even a real veteran? Half these guys are faking it for handouts. Look at him. Probably never saw real combat in his life." Those words pushed Marcus to speak up, despite his preference for avoiding conflict. "I served 2 tours in Afghanistan," he said quietly. "Lost 3 friends in my unit to an IED. Got my leg torn up in the same blast." His voice carried the weight of genuine experience and loss. James heard the truth in Marcus's words immediately. The Royal Guard had served alongside American forces in Afghanistan and had profound respect for the sacrifices made by soldiers from all allied nations. The casual dismissal of Marcus's service and suffering struck James as not just insulting, but fundamentally wrong on a moral level. "Sir," James said to the bully, his voice taking on the crisp authority he used when addressing subordinates, "I'm going to give you one opportunity to apologize to this veteran and walk away from this situation with your dignity intact." The threat wasn't spoken, but it hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Everyone in the checkout area could feel it. The mother with her children had moved protectively closer to her kids, while still watching with fascination. Other customers had stopped pretending to shop and were openly staring at the confrontation. The bully, however, was too caught up in his own anger and embarrassment to recognize the danger he was in. Instead of backing down, he doubled down on his aggression. "Are you threatening me, T-boy? Because I don't take threats from anyone, especially not from some foreign soldier who's probably never seen real action." That comment proved to be the final straw. James had served in Helmand Province during some of the heaviest fighting of the Afghanistan conflict. He had lost friends to IEDs, sniper fire, and suicide bombers. He had carried wounded comrades to safety under enemy fire, and had been decorated for valor by both British and American commanders. The suggestion that he hadn't seen real action was not just insulting, it was factually absurd. "Real action?" James repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Let me tell you about real action, mate. Real action is watching your best friend step on a landmine because you chose the wrong path on patrol. Real action is holding a 19-year-old soldier while he bleeds out in your arms, asking you to tell his mother he was brave." The grocery store had gone completely silent. Even the background music seemed to have stopped. James continued, his words cutting through the air like precision strikes. "Real action is coming home from that hell and still believing that the freedoms you fought for mean something. Freedoms that include the right for veterans like this gentleman to shop for groceries without being harassed by people who wouldn't last 5 minutes in the situations he's survived." Marcus felt a surge of emotion he hadn't experienced since his discharge. Here was someone who understood, someone who got it in a way that most civilians never could. The brotherhood of arms was real, and it transcended national boundaries. The bully looked around the store, suddenly aware that every eye was on him, and that public opinion had shifted completely against him. But instead of retreating, his embarrassment transformed into rage. "You think your fancy accent and tough guy act scare me? I don't care if you're the Queen's own guard dog. This is America, and I'll say whatever I want to, whoever I want." The reference to the Queen's Guard was closer to the truth than the bully realized, but it also revealed that he had completely misread the situation. James wasn't putting on an act or trying to intimidate anyone. He was simply a highly trained soldier who had reached the limit of his patience with cruelty and disrespect. "Actually," James said, straightening to his full height, "that's exactly what I am." The admission sent a ripple of shock through the gathered crowd. Several people pulled out their phones, sensing that they were about to witness something extraordinary. The Royal Guard had just identified himself, and everyone present suddenly realized they were in the presence of someone whose job was literally to protect royalty. The bully's eyes widened as the implications sank in. He had been harassing a disabled veteran in front of a member of the Queen's Guard. But instead of backing down, his anger and pride pushed him toward a decision that would prove to be catastrophically poor judgment. "I don't care if you're the Queen herself," he snarled, and then made the mistake that would define the next few minutes of his life. He shoved James hard in the chest, putting his full weight behind the attack. The moment the bully's hands made contact with James's chest, time seemed to slow down for everyone watching. The Royal Guard absorbed the shove without moving more than an inch backward, his feet planted like tree roots and his core solid as granite. Years of hand-to-hand combat training and physical conditioning meant that the aggressive push barely registered as more than an annoyance. What happened next was a masterclass in controlled military response. James didn't immediately retaliate. Instead, he looked down at the hands that had just assaulted him, then back up at the bully's face with an expression of calm disappointment. "Sir, you have now committed assault against a member of Her Majesty's Guard. I strongly advise you to step back and reconsider your next actions." The warning was delivered in the same tone James might use to inform someone they had dropped their wallet. Professional, clear, and completely without emotion. But everyone present could sense the coiled power beneath that calm exterior, like watching a tiger decide whether or not to pounce. The bully, however, was beyond rational thought. The adrenaline of confrontation had taken over, and he interpreted James's restraint as weakness. "What are you going to do about it, palace toy? Call your mommy queen?" That insult crossed a line that even James's legendary discipline couldn't ignore. The Queen wasn't just his employer, She was the living symbol of everything he had sworn to protect and serve. The disrespect toward the crown combined with the earlier attacks on Marcus created a perfect storm of justified anger within the Royal Guard's trained psyche. "I'm going to give you exactly 3 seconds to apologize," James said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 1. The grocery store had become completely silent, except for the hum of refrigeration units and the quiet whir of security cameras that were capturing every moment. Even the children seemed to understand that something momentous was about to happen. 2. The bully laughed, a harsh sound that revealed his complete misunderstanding of the situation. He raised his hand as if to shove James again, confident that this foreign soldier would continue to show restraint. "Go ahead and count to 1,000,000, pretty boy. I'm not scared of some dress-up soldier who probably never been in a real fight." 3. What happened next lasted approximately 4 seconds and would be replayed thousands of times on social media in the hours to come. James moved with the fluid precision of someone who had trained in close-quarters combat for over 2 decades. The Royal Guard's hand shot out and caught the bully's extended wrist in a grip that could crush bones if needed. In one smooth motion, James twisted the captured arm behind the man's back while simultaneously sweeping his legs out from under him. The bully found himself face down on the grocery store floor before his brain could even process what had happened. James knelt beside him, one knee pressed into the man's back, maintaining the arm lock with just enough pressure to ensure compliance without causing permanent damage. The entire takedown had been executed with surgical precision and absolute control. "Now then," James said conversationally as if discussing the weather, "let's talk about manners." The gathered crowd erupted in gasps and scattered applause. Several people were recording with their phones, capturing the moment when the Royal Guard had demonstrated exactly why he was entrusted with protecting the most important family in Britain. Marcus stood watching in amazement. He had seen military police action before, but never anything quite so smooth and professional. James had neutralized a larger, aggressive opponent without breaking a sweat or showing any signs of anger or loss of control. "Here's what's going to happen," James continued, maintaining his conversational tone while keeping the bully immobilized. "You're going to apologize to this veteran for your inexcusable behavior. Then you're going to leave this store and think very carefully about how you treat people in the future." The pressure on the bully's arm increased just slightly, not enough to cause injury, but more than enough to make the point that resistance was futile. "Do we understand each other?" "Yes," the man gasped into the linoleum floor. "Yes, I understand." "Excellent. Now, let's hear that apology." James released the pressure slightly, allowing the bully to turn his head toward Marcus. The man's face was red with embarrassment and the realization that he had seriously misjudged his opponents. "I'm sorry," he mumbled toward Marcus. "I was out of line. I shouldn't have said those things." Marcus looked down at his tormentor with a mixture of satisfaction and pity. "Apology accepted," he said simply. "But you should think about why you felt the need to attack someone you don't even know." James helped the bully to his feet with surprising gentleness, brushing dust off the man's expensive clothes. "There we are. Much better." He fixed the man with a steady gaze. "I trust this experience has been educational for you." The bully nodded, frantically, no longer showing any trace of his earlier aggression. He had learned the hard way that attacking veterans was a poor choice, especially when other veterans were watching. "Off you go then," James said pleasantly. "And remember, every veteran you meet has earned your respect, not your contempt." The man grabbed his abandoned shopping cart and hurried toward the exit, moving as fast as his dignity would allow. As he pushed through the automatic doors, several customers spontaneously began to applaud. James turned to Marcus with a genuine smile. "Are you all right, mate? That looked like it aggravated your leg injury." The simple question, asked with genuine concern, nearly brought tears to Marcus's eyes. It had been a long time since anyone had shown such immediate understanding and care for his situation. "I'm fine," Marcus replied. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." "Nothing good," James admitted. "But that's what we do for each other, isn't it? Look after our brothers in arms." The phrase resonated through the store, reminding everyone present that they had just witnessed something special, not just the skill of an elite soldier, but the bond that connects all those who have served their countries with honor. The grocery store erupted in spontaneous applause as the bully disappeared through the automatic doors. Customers who had been watching from nearby aisles gathered around James and Marcus, their faces showing a mixture of admiration and amazement at what they had just witnessed. "That was incredible," said the mother who had been ahead of Marcus in line. Her children peeked out from behind her legs, looking at James with the wide-eyed wonder that children reserve for real-life superheroes. "Are you really one of the Queen's Guards?" James smiled modestly, the intensity of the confrontation melting away to reveal his natural warmth and approachability. "I am indeed. Sergeant James Wellington, currently stationed at Buckingham Palace." He knelt down to the children's level. "But right now, I'm just a dad buying cereal for my daughter's breakfast." The normalcy of that statement contrasted sharply with the extraordinary display of skill they had just witnessed. Here was a man who spent his days protecting royalty, yet he was humble enough to introduce himself as simply a father doing weekend shopping. An elderly man who had been watching from the pharmacy counter approached with tears in his eyes. "Son, I served in Vietnam and I want to shake your hand. What you did for that young veteran, that's what military brotherhood is all about." As James shook the Vietnam veteran's hand, Marcus felt overwhelmed by the support suddenly surrounding him. For months after his discharge, he had felt invisible, struggling with both physical pain and the psychological adjustment to civilian life. The casual cruelty he had endured from the bully was unfortunately not uncommon in his daily experience. But this moment was showing him a different side of humanity. The store manager, a middle-aged woman named Carol, approached the group with obvious concern and gratitude. "Sir, I want to apologize that this happened in our store. We have security. Cameras and everything was recorded. If either of you want to press charges against that man for assault and harassment, we have clear evidence." James looked to Marcus, deferring to the veteran's wishes. "It's your call, mate. He did assault you first, and harassment of disabled veterans is taken quite seriously by law enforcement." Marcus considered for a moment. Part of him wanted justice for the humiliation and pain he had endured, but another part, the part shaped by military service and personal growth through hardship, leaned toward mercy. "I think he learned his lesson today," Marcus said finally. "But maybe you could ban him from the store? I'd rather not have to worry about running into him again during my shopping." Carol nodded immediately. "Absolutely. His photo will be shared with all our security staff. He won't be welcomed back." As they spoke, several customers were posting videos of the confrontation on social media. Within minutes, hashtags like the Royal Guard Justice and veteran support began trending locally. The story was spreading rapidly through the community's digital networks. A teenage employee approached hesitantly, holding his phone. "Excuse me, sir, but my video of what happened is already getting shared like crazy. People are calling you a hero. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" James chuckled and raised his hands. "I'm hardly a hero, lad. I just did what anyone should do when they see someone being bullied. The real heroes are the veterans like Marcus here, who served their country and continue to face challenges with dignity." The deflection of attention away from himself and toward Marcus was typical of James's character, but it had an unexpected effect. The gathered crowd began to focus more attention on the veteran, asking about his service and expressing gratitude for his sacrifice. Marcus, who had felt forgotten and dismissed by society for so long, found himself surrounded by people who wanted to hear his story and express their appreciation. An older couple offered to pay for his groceries. A young mother asked if she could introduce her children to him so they could thank a real veteran. A college student asked for his autograph, saying her brother was deployed overseas and she wanted to show him that people at home cared about soldiers. The attention was overwhelming but healing for Marcus. He had spent so long feeling like a burden on society that he had forgotten how many people actually respected and appreciated military service. "This is quite something," Marcus said to James, as they finally made their way through the checkout line together. "I haven't felt this supported since I was discharged." James nodded understanding. "The support is always there, mate. Sometimes it just takes the right moment to bring it out. People generally want to do the right thing. They just need to see leadership and courage in action. The cashier, who had witnessed the entire confrontation, refused to let either man pay for their groceries. "It's the least we can do," she insisted. "What you both represent, service, courage, standing up for what's right, that matters more than the cost of some food." As they walked toward the exit together, James pulled out his phone. "Marcus, I'd like to give you my number. I know some people who work with veteran support organizations. There are resources available: medical care, job training, counseling, services, things that might help make life a bit easier." Marcus felt another wave of emotion. "I'd appreciate that. It's been hard trying to figure out the system on my own." "You shouldn't have to do it alone," James replied firmly. "That's not how this works. We look after each other." Outside the store, a small crowd had gathered. Word had spread quickly through the community about the confrontation, and people were coming to see the Royal Guard and show support for the veteran. Local news crews were beginning to arrive, having picked up the story from social media. James looked at the gathering crowd and then at Marcus. "Are you up for this? It looks like our quiet Saturday morning is about to become very public." Marcus straightened his shoulders, feeling stronger than he had in months. "You know what? I think I am ready. Maybe other veterans need to see that there are people who will stand up for us. Maybe this story can help someone else feel less alone." The two soldiers, separated by nationality but united by service and mutual respect, walked toward the waiting crowd together. Behind them, the grocery store returned to normal, but the story of what had happened would continue to spread, inspiring others and reminding everyone that courage comes in many forms. 3 weeks after the grocery store incident, Marcus Thompson's life had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. The video of James defending him had gone viral, accumulating over 2 million views and thousands of supportive comments from around the world. But more importantly, it had connected Marcus with a network of support he hadn't known existed. The job offers started coming within days of the story breaking. Local businesses reached out, wanting to hire the veteran who had shown such grace under pressure. A construction company offered him a position that would accommodate his physical limitations. A logistics firm wanted him to help train their security staff, recognizing that his military experience was valuable. After months of struggling to find employment, Marcus suddenly had choices. He chose to work with Veterans Assistance Network, a nonprofit organization that had contacted him through James's connections. His role involved helping other veterans navigate the challenges of civilian life, something he understood intimately. The irony wasn't lost on him that his most humiliating moment had become the doorway to his most fulfilling career. James had kept his promise about connecting Marcus with resources. The Royal Guard had introduced him to a VA counselor who specialized in combat trauma, a physical therapist who worked specifically with injured veterans, and a financial advisor who helped military families manage their benefits. For the first time since his discharge, Marcus felt like he had a team supporting his recovery. The grocery store had become something of a local landmark. Carol, the manager, had installed a small plaque near the entrance that read, "In honor of all veterans, your service matters. Your sacrifices are remembered and your dignity will always be respected here." The store had also partnered with local veteran organizations to provide a monthly discount day for military families. James's commanding officer had initially been concerned about the public attention surrounding one of his guards. But when the deal story reached international news and generated overwhelmingly positive coverage for both the Royal Guard and British-American military cooperation, the concerns quickly turned to commendation. James received a letter of recognition for his exemplary conduct and for representing the finest traditions of military service. The bully from that day had also experienced consequences. His employer, a local real estate company, had seen the viral video and decided they couldn't have someone representing their business who would attack disabled veterans in public. He lost his job and found himself the subject of community disapproval wherever he went. Eventually, he wrote a public apology letter that was published in the local newspaper, acknowledging his behavior and announcing his intention to volunteer. with veteran support organizations as a way of making amends. On a sunny Thursday afternoon, Marcus stood in front of a room full of recently discharged veterans at the VA hospital. He wore a new suit, his first in years, and felt confident in a way that had been missing since his injury. His role as a peer counselor allowed him to share his story and help others understand that the challenges they faced didn't define their worth. 3 weeks ago, I was shopping for groceries and feeling pretty low about my place in the world, Marcus told the group. A stranger attacked me for being disabled, for being a veteran, for taking up space in his world. But another stranger, a soldier from across the ocean, stood up for me. That moment changed everything. He paused, looking at the faces of men and women who were struggling with many of the same issues he had faced. The support was always there. The respect was always there. Sometimes it just takes the right moment, the right person to help us see it. You are not burdens on society. You are heroes who deserve dignity, respect, and opportunity. After his presentation, a young Marine approached Marcus. She had lost her right arm to an IED in Syria and was struggling with depression and unemployment. "How do you get past feeling like people see you as broken?" she asked. Marcus smiled, remembering asking himself the same question not long ago. "You start by seeing yourself the way James saw me that day, not as someone broken, but as someone strong enough to survive things that would destroy other people. Our wounds are proof of our courage, not evidence of our weakness." Meanwhile, James had returned to his duties at Buckingham Palace, but the incident had affected him deeply as well. During his off-duty hours, he began volunteering with a program that connected British and American veterans. The experience of defending Marcus had reminded him why he had chosen military service in the first place, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, and to stand for justice when others remained silent. His wife Sarah had watched the viral video with pride and concern. "I'm proud of what you did," she told him over dinner with their daughters. "But I worry about you getting involved in these situations when you're not on duty." James considered her words carefully. "I understand your concern, love. But I took an oath to protect and serve, and that doesn't stop just because I'm buying groceries. If I see someone being attacked for their service to their country, I can't just walk away." His 8-year-old daughter Emma looked up from her plate. "Daddy, the kids at school say you're famous now. They want to know if you really know the Queen." James laughed. "I do know the Queen, sweetheart. And do you know what she would say about what happened at the store? She would say that helping others is what good people do, whether they're famous or not." The incident had indeed reached the highest levels of the British government. The Queen herself had been briefed on the situation and had expressed her approval of James's conduct. A private letter from the palace had thanked him for representing the finest traditions of the Royal Guard and for demonstrating the special relationship between Britain and America through his actions. 6 months later, Marcus and James met again, this time at a Veterans Charity Gala, where Marcus was being honored for his work with the Veterans Assistance Network. The two men had maintained their friendship, bonding over their shared experiences and their commitment to helping other veterans. "Look at you," James said, admiring Marcus's confidence and obvious happiness. "From grocery store confrontation to veteran advocate. Quite a journey." Marcus nodded, reflecting on how much had changed. "That morning, I felt invisible and forgotten. Tonight I'm receiving an award for helping other veterans find their way home. None of it would have happened without your intervention." "Nonsense," James replied firmly. "You had the strength and character all along. I just helped create the opportunity for others to see it." The evening's keynote speaker was a retired general who had served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. During his remarks, he specifically mentioned the grocery store incident as an example of how military brotherhood transcends borders and service branches. When Sergeant Wellington stepped in to defend Sergeant Thompson, he wasn't acting as a British soldier or an American soldier, the general said. He was acting as one warrior protecting another. That's the bond that makes our military alliance so strong. In the audience, both men felt the weight of that truth. Their chance encounter had become something larger than either of them had anticipated. a symbol of international military cooperation and veteran support that had inspired thousands of people around the world. After the ceremony, Marcus was approached by a publisher who wanted him to write a book about his experiences. A film producer expressed interest in turning the story into a movie. Speaking requests poured in from veteran organizations, schools, and community groups who wanted to hear the story firsthand. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when the young Marine who had approached Marcus after his presentation walked up to him at the gala. She wore her dress uniform, her prosthetic arm clearly visible, and carried herself with newfound confidence. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "Your story helped me realize that my injury doesn't define me. I started college last month studying social work. I want to help other veterans the way you helped me." Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. "That's the greatest honor you could give me," he said. "Pay it forward. Help someone else find their strength." As the evening wound down, James prepared to return to his duties in London. He would soon be rotating back to active military operations, but the friendship he had formed with Marcus would endure. "Before I go," James said, "I want you to know something. That day in the grocery store wasn't just about defending you from a bully. It was about defending what we both believe in. That service matters, that sacrifice should be honored, and that people have a responsibility to stand up for what's right." Marcus clasped his friend's hand. "That message is spreading. Every veteran I help, every person who sees our story and decides to be kinder to someone struggling, it all ripples out from that moment when you chose to act instead of walking away." The story of the grocery store confrontation had become more than just a viral video. It had become a reminder that ordinary moments can become extraordinary when people choose courage over convenience, compassion over indifference, and action over apathy. Years later, both men would continue their service in different ways, James protecting the crown and Marcus protecting vulnerable veterans. But they would always share the memory of that Saturday morning when a simple act of standing up for what was right had key